She raised her wineglass, swearing she'd sign my termination papers the second she became CEO. I just smiled. The pen she planned to use was mine. They thought I'd cry at the table, but they didn't know I'd hidden the last family safe key. That night, one call from me turned Thanksgiving dinner into the opening shot of a 3-layer plan. The truth, the law, and a legal magic trick no one saw coming. My name is Savannah Pierce. I am 34 years old, and for the last decade, I have been the Chief Operating Officer of Northbridge Forge, the company my great-grandfather built from slag and vision. Tonight, that title was stripped from me between the turkey and the pecan pie. The annual Thanksgiving dinner at the Pierce family estate in Lake Haven is less a celebration of gratitude and more a formal review of assets. The air in the grand dining room, hung with suffocating velvet drapes, is always thick with unspoken agendas. This year was different. The silence was heavier. The crystal seemed to shiver with a tension so sharp I could taste it, a metallic tang beneath the smell of roasted thyme and old wine. The room was lit to perfection, as always. The chandeliers, heavy with Austrian crystal, cast a glittering, cold light over the 20-foot mahogany table. The silver, our family's king's pattern, was polished to a mirror finish, reflecting the strained faces of the cousins and aunts who had been summoned to bear witness. It was a performance, and I was the designated sacrifice. I sat at my usual place, to the left of my father, Graham. Across from me was my mother, Elaine, her beauty still remarkable, her focus entirely dedicated to the floral centerpiece, as if its arrangement could ward off the impending collision. And then there was Lydia, my sister, 31 years old, and the designated son of our family's solar system. She arrived wearing winter white, an absurdly angelic choice that contrasted sharply with the predatory gleam in her eyes. She was the favored one, the one who inherited our mother's looks and our father's ruthless ambition, but none of my great-grandfather's integrity. On her left hand, she wore a new ring. It was not an engagement ring. Lydia was not the sentimental type. This was a heavy, audacious cocktail ring, a sapphire the size of a robin's egg, flanked by diamonds. It was a corporate bonus made manifest, a trophy. It was, I knew, a welcome to the throne gift from our father. It was an exhibit, a piece of evidence. Dinner proceeded with the grim, precise rhythm of a state execution. Small talk was attempted by distant relatives, but it died quickly, smothered by the sheer weight of what was to come. I felt my father's gaze on me, calculating. My mother, across the table, picked at her food, her silence a familiar betrayal. Then I saw it. Graham caught Lydia's eye, a barely perceptible nod. Elaine's hand fluttered to her pearls, a nervous tick she'd had my entire life. Lydia's answering smile was slow, triumphant. I didn't need to be a COO to understand the signals. I'd spent my entire adult life reading hostile boardrooms. I smelled the familiar, sterile scent of human resources paperwork, the ink of a termination letter. This was it. Lydia stood. She was graceful. I'll give her that. She moved like a dancer, her ivory dress flowing around her. She picked up her crystal champagne flute, champagne on Thanksgiving, another of her pretentious flourishes, and tapped it lightly with a silver spoon. Clink, clink, clink. The sound was sharp, arrogant. It sliced through the remaining murmurs, demanding silence. All eyes turned to her. "If I could have everyone's attention," she began, her voice smooth as silk, practiced in conference calls and media interviews. "I just want to say how wonderful it is to have the whole family here." She paused, letting her gaze sweep the table, landing on me for just a fraction of a second too long. This year has been one of historic change. As you all know, Father has been preparing for his transition, looking for the right leadership to guide Northbridge Forge into the next century. My father, Graham, beamed. He might as well have been presenting a prized mare. "After a long and very thorough review," she continued, "the board held a special vote this morning, and I am humbled, truly humbled, to announce that as of tomorrow, I will be taking on the responsibilities of Chief Executive Officer." A scattered, Obligatory round of applause. My mother's was frantic, her eyes still glued to the dying roses in the centerpiece. Lydia held up her hand, the sapphire winking in the candlelight. Thank you. Thank you. It's a huge responsibility. Her eyes found mine again. This was the part she had been waiting for. This was the entire point of the dinner. The lights, the audience. As CEO, my first duty is to the future of this company. That means making hard decisions. It means bringing in a new vision. She took a small, deliberate breath. She was savoring this. Savannah, she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. You have served this company adequately, but your vision, it's just not aligned with our new direction. Your position as COO will be terminated. Effective tomorrow morning, we'll have security escort you out to collect your personal items. We need a fresh start. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum, sucking the air from my lungs. I could feel every eye at that table on me. The cousins, the aunts, my parents. They were waiting for the explosion. They were waiting for the tears, the screaming, the accusations. They were waiting for me to break, to validate Lydia's power by showing my pain. My mother finally looked at me, her face pale, her lips parted in a silent, useless plea. My father stared, his expression unreadable, that of a man finalizing a difficult but necessary acquisition. And Lydia, her smile was one of perfect, triumphant pity. I felt a strange calm settle over me, the tension that had lived in my shoulders for 20 years, the constant, grinding pressure of trying to be good enough, smart enough, tough enough to earn my place. It all just evaporated. Slowly, deliberately, I folded my linen napkin. I placed it on the table to the left of my plate, which was still half full. I looked up, meeting my sister's gaze. Her smile faltered, just for a second. This was not the reaction she had planned for. Congratulations, Lydia, I said. My voice was even, clear, not a tremor in it. I pushed back my chair. The sound of its legs scraping against the polished floor was obscenely loud in the silent room. I stood. If you'll excuse me. I turned my back on them, on the food, on the family, on the entire sham of a life I had been leading. I walked out of the dining room. I didn't run. My steps were measured. I could feel the back of my neck prickling, the force of their combined shock following me like a physical weight. In the grand foyer, I retrieved my coat from the closet. A dark wool coat, practical, warm, my armor. As I put it on, I felt the familiar weight of the keys in the pocket. I walked down the long ancestral hall toward the front door. The walls were lined with the portraits of the Pierces who came before. My great-grandfather, Arthur Pierce, his face stern, his hands calloused even in the formal oil painting. His son, my grandfather, who expanded the forge during the war. They were men of steel, men who built things. They were not men who staged coups at holiday dinners. My father's portrait hung at the end of the hall. It was a modern, flattering painting, showing him smiling in a boardroom, a phone to his ear, a deal-maker, not a builder. I looked at Arthur's portrait one last time. He started this with his bare hands and an unshakable belief in the quality of his work. He'd been bought out by his own blood, replaced by spreadsheets and hostile takeovers. As I walked, I felt the tendons on the back of my right hand, which had been clenched into a fist inside my pocket, finally relax. It wasn't anger I felt. It was release. It was the sudden, sharp, exhilarating feeling of a chain snapping. The performance was over. I stepped out into the cold Colorado night. The air was sharp and clean, a welcome contrast to the suffocating atmosphere of the house. I walked to my car, a simple dark sedan, not the flashy sports car Lydia drove. The cold leather of the driver's seat felt good. I sat there for a moment, in the dark, the engine off. The house glowed behind me, a monument to a legacy I no longer had to protect. I pulled out my phone. I scrolled to a single contact, a name I had programmed in over a year ago. The label just read, Vault. I pressed the call button. It rang once. A deep, calm voice answered. Savannah? Elliot Vance, our former head of strategy, the sharpest man I'd ever known, the only one who saw the rot in the company's financials, the man my father and Lydia had amicably parted ways with 12 months prior when he started asking too many questions. He was the first person I called after he was fired. He had been on my private payroll ever since. I took a deep breath, the first truly deep breath I'd taken all night. The fog of it plumed in the cold air. "Begin phase 1. "It's done," Elliot said, his voice devoid of surprise. "The network flags I set up lit up 30 minutes ago, just as you were probably sitting down to dessert. The board vote was filed at 5:07 p.m. Unanimous, of course, except for your chair, which was vacant." "They did it at dinner, Elliot," I said, my voice flat, the engine still off. In front of the entire family, Lydia announced it. There was a heavy pause on the line. Elliot was a numbers man, a strategist who detested emotional variables. This move, this public shaming, was something he would find inefficient. "That's Baroque," he finally said, the distaste clear in his tone. "A theatrical flourish. It means they're overconfident. That's good for us. The data package is being sent to your secure drop now. I suggest you don't go home." "Already ahead of you," I replied. "I'm heading to the fallback, the Evergreen Motel off I-70. I'll be dark, then, unless you trigger the alert. You know the protocol. Savannah," he added, his voice dropping slightly. "This is the part where you just absorb. No reacting. You're a black hole. Let them throw themselves into you." "Got it. Elliot, phase 1, absorb." I ended the call and started the car. I didn't look back at the glowing windows of the estate. I just drove. The Evergreen Motel was a relic from another era, a 2-story, L-shaped building with peeling paint and a flickering neon sign that buzzed in the cold night air. It was the last place anyone in my family would ever look for me. I paid cash for room 104, using a name that didn't exist, and locked the deadbolt and the chain behind me. The room smelled of industrial cleaner and stale cigarettes. I didn't turn on the main light, just the small lamp on the cheap desk. I pulled my laptop from my bag, a hardened, encrypted device that had never once touched the Northbridge Forge network. I connected it to a disposable burner hotspot. The file from Elliot was waiting, a single, compressed file protected by a 40-character alphanumeric key. I typed it in from memory. It unpacked into a universe of betrayal. Elliot's report was the first thing I opened. It was cold, precise, and utterly terrifying. For the past 6 months, a ghost had been living in the Northbridge accounting system, a ghost who looked exactly like me. He had isolated 41 separate transactions. They were small enough to fly under the radar of a major audit, but large enough to add up to a felony. The smallest was $60,000. The largest was $480,000. Pushed through just last week. Total damage, just over $9.2 million. Each transaction was routed to a newly created consulting vendor. Names I'd never heard of. Apex Global Strategies, Silverline Solutions, Ridgeback Advisory, shell companies, all of them. Registered in Delaware or Nevada, with no websites and no public footprint. The real genius of the plan, Elliot noted, was the timing. He'd cross-referenced the approval timestamps with my travel calendar. The $60,000 payment was approved by me on August 4th. At 10:32 a.m., I was in the air, on a flight to Dusseldorf to inspect our German supplier's new production line. The $480,000 transfer was authorized on November 15th. I was in a shielded, no-reception conference room in Chicago, negotiating a raw materials contract. My phone and laptop were in a secure lockbox at the door, per the client's protocol. Every single one of the 41 transactions coincided with a time I was verifiably, provably offline, in transit, or in a secure meeting. They had used my own efficiency and my dedication to the company as their cover. They had weaponized my work ethic. The documentation was flawless. Each payment had a corresponding purchase order and invoice, and on each one, my digital signature was perfectly rendered. Not a forgery, Elliot explained, but a direct lift and paste of my secure signature file from the executive server, an inside job of the highest order. Then there were the emails. They had created a parallel approval chain. The emails from me to the accounting department used my exact phrasing, my subject lines, my tendency to use please action instead of please approve. They had studied me. They had downloaded my professional personality and created a puppet. This is the kill shot, Savannah. Elliot's report concluded. This is not just a pretext for firing you. This is the insurance policy. The moment you file a wrongful termination lawsuit, the moment you even whisper a complaint to an outside director, Graham and Lydia will drop this entire fraud file, complete with a tearful confession of discovering it, on the district attorney's desk. You won't just be fired, you'll be indicted before you can even get a lawyer on the phone. This is a checkmate. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a cold, crystalline rage. This wasn't just a corporate takeover. This was an assassination. They didn't just want me gone. They wanted me destroyed, discredited, and possibly imprisoned, all to secure Lydia's place on the throne. I closed Elliot's summary and opened the raw data. This was my world. As COO, I live in data, logs, timestamps, workflows. I was fluent in the language of systems, and my family had just tried to use my own language against me. The files spilled across my screen. Server logs, IP routing tables, email headers, metadata from the forged approval documents. I spread the printouts I'd brought with me across the room's stained bedspread and the floor. My real files, my travel itineraries, boarding passes, scanned copies of hotel receipts with GPS data embedded in the EXIF files of the photos, my signed, original employment contract, the real, ink-on-paper contracts I had negotiated, which I'd started scanning and saving to a private drive 2 years ago. It was a chessboard, their pieces on one side, my pieces on the other. For hours, I worked. I didn't feel the cold. I didn't feel the exhaustion. I was a machine processing a problem. I traced the IP addresses from the server logs. The approvals hadn't come from my devices. They had come from a single, unidentified IP address, routed through a proxy in Eastern Europe. But the original login request, the one that initiated the session where the fraud was committed, pinged from a hardline inside the Northbridge Forge executive wing. Of course it did. I traced the money, the shell companies, Apex, Silverline, Ridgeback. They were just waypoints. The money landed, sat for less than 24 hours, and was then wired out again, this time internationally. All of it, every single dollar from all 41 transactions, from all 3 shell companies, went to a single, final destination. A custodial trust in Antigua, the Ravenhall Custodial Trust. I stared at the name, Ravenhall. It was a name Lydia had loved. It was the name of a Gothic novel she'd read as a teenager, the name of a black horse she'd wanted but never gotten. It was her tell, her one, single, arrogant mistake. She couldn't resist putting her signature on it, however veiled. They thought they were being clever with their complex routing, but they consolidated their theft. They made it easy to trace. If you knew where to look, they had created a single, massive target. I began my real work. First, I documented my own signature. I pulled up dozens of real documents I had signed digitally. I analyzed the metadata, the time of day, the pressure point data from my stylus on the signature pad. I created a behavioral profile of my own digital tell, the way I loop the S, the exact velocity of the cross on the V. The forgery, by contrast, was a static image. It was perfect, and therefore, it was perfectly fake. It had no velocity, no pressure, no life. Next, I took my travel evidence, the plane tickets, the hotel receipts, the GPS-tagged photos from my phone proving I was in Dusseldorf, Chicago, and 20 other places when I was supposedly committing fraud from my desk in Lake Haven. I collated each piece of evidence and tied it, with a timestamp, to one of the 41 fraudulent transactions. I was building a countersuit. No, not a suit. An alibi. An ironclad, unshakable alibi. I worked until the first gray light of dawn started to seep through the gap in the cheap curtains. My fingers ached. My eyes burned. I opened a secure connection to the private server Elliot had built for me. We called it Anvil. It was hosted in a country with no extradition treaty, in a facility that was rumored to be inside a mountain. It was my vault. I began to upload everything. The entire data package from Elliot. My own analysis, the Ravenhall connection, the signature profile, my complete, annotated alibi for the past 6 months, every real contract, every GPS tag, every boarding pass. It was a data bomb, and I was setting the fuse. I leaned back in the creaking chair. The plan was clear. They expected me to fight. They wanted me to yell, to sue, to make a scene. That was the trap. They had the DA's file ready to go. So I would do the opposite. I would not fight. I would not resist. I would walk into the lion's den tomorrow morning, smile, and sign any piece of paper they put in front of me. I would sign my termination papers. I would sign a non-disclosure agreement. I would sign a non-compete. I would let them believe they had won, that I was broken, that I was a defeated, humiliated woman walking away. I would let them get confident. I would let them get comfortable in their new roles. I would let Lydia sit in my chair, use my office, and believe she was in charge. Confidence breeds carelessness. Power breeds arrogance. They had showed their hand, but they thought the game was over. It was just beginning. Phase 1 was complete. I had survived the initial attack. I had my intelligence. I had my fortress. Now, it was time to exist in the silence, to let them make the next move, and the next. While I prepared the ground for Phase 2, I would be a ghost, just as they had tried to make me. I didn't sleep. What I did was shower in the cracked tile bathroom of the Evergreen Motel, the lukewarm water washing away the estate's expensive perfume but not the lingering chill of the night. I dressed in a spare suit I kept in my car, a charcoal gray wool, unremarkable, practical, armor. By 6 a.m., the sky over Lake Haven was a deep, bruised purple. I didn't drive to my designated executive parking spot. I parked the sedan in the general visitor lot, 3 blocks away from the Northbridge Forge Tower. I walked in with the early maintenance crews, just another face in the pre-dawn shadows. I badged into the lobby. The guard, a man I'd shared a joke with just last week, barely looked up. On the executive floor, the 35th floor, the plush carpets absorbed the sound of my approach. My office, the COO's office, was dark. A glass-walled cage overlooking the sleeping city. I used my keycard. The lock clicked green and buzzed open. They hadn't deactivated me yet. It was a small, arrogant oversight. They expected me to arrive at 9, weeping, to be escorted by security. They didn't anticipate I'd be here before the sun. I didn't turn on the overhead lights. The glow from the city was enough. I took a single, standard-issue banker's box from the supply closet. I began to pack. I didn't take the awards, the Women in Industry plaques, the Innovator of the Year statues. I left them on the shelves. They were props for the role, and I wasn't playing that part anymore. I packed the contents of my bottom right desk drawer, a spare pair of running shoes, a framed photo of my college rowing team, a bag of dark chocolate almonds. Then, from my coat pocket, I retrieved the real purpose of my visit. It was a man's ring, heavy, oxidized silver, with a thick band and a large, flat, rectangular onyx stone. It was my great-grandfather's, Arthur Pierce, the man who started it all, the one with the calloused hands in the portrait. It was supposedly his 20-year service ring. I'd given it to Elliot 6 months ago, along with a significant portion of my savings. His specialist, a man who used to build surveillance gear for a 3-letter agency, had hollowed out the heavy setting. The onyx was now a synthetic lens, housing a pinhole camera. The thick band held a high-fidelity microphone and a battery array that would self-charge using ambient light and heat. With a 30-day active life, It synced via a compromised low-level network frequency, uploading its feed directly to the anvil. It was a Trojan horse, powered by sentiment. I didn't hide it. I placed it on the wide expanse of the mahogany desk, to the left of the keyboard blotter, right where a nervous hand would rest, or where a new executive might fiddle with the artifacts of their predecessor, a forgotten, meaningless piece of family history. My packing was done by 8:15 a.m. The office was beginning to stir. My executive assistant, Maria, arrived at 8:30. She saw the box, my coat on my arm, and her face crumpled. "Ms. Pierce, the email this morning from Mr. Pierce, It's okay, Maria," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "It's a new direction. Lydia will be taking this office." Word spread faster than a fire in a dry forest. For the next 20 minutes, a quiet, mournful, and furious procession came to my door. Not the executives, not the VPs who orbited my father. It was the engineers from research and development. It was the head of logistics, a man I'd fought to promote. It was the shift supervisors from the foundry floor. They came one by one. "This is wrong, Miss Pierce," one said, his jaw tight. "Thank you, for everything," said another. They shook my hand, and as they did, they pressed things into my palm. A folded piece of paper, a business card with a number scrawled on the back. My personal cell, not the company phone. "If you land somewhere, anywhere, you call me. I'll walk." We know who did the work. We know. By the time I was ready to leave, my pockets were full of their personal contact information. They had built their careers on loyalty to the forge, not just to the family name. Lydia and my father had forgotten to account for that. I had just acquired a shadow company, an army of loyalists. At exactly 9:01 a.m., two large men in dark suits, men I'd never seen before, appeared at my door. They were not our regular corporate security. They were contractors, hired muscle. "Ms. Pierce," the first one said, his voice flat, "we're here to escort you from the premises." "I know the way," I said. I picked up my one box. I walked past them, down the long corridor lined with patents I had helped file. I didn't look back. I stepped into the elevator. The polished steel doors slid shut, reflecting my calm, blank face. As the elevator descended, I pulled out my secure phone, the one Elliot gave me. I held it in my hand. The elevator stopped at the lobby. I walked across the marble floor. I pushed through the heavy glass doors. I stepped out onto the sidewalk, into the bright, cold morning air. My phone vibrated, a single notification, on the encrypted app. "Device active. AV stream acquired." I got into my car, the one parked 3 blocks away. I didn't start the engine. I put a single, wireless earpiece in my left ear and tapped the notification. The sound was sharp, immediate. I heard the whoosh of my old office door. I heard Lydia's sharp, staccato footsteps. "Is she gone?" Lydia demanded. "Yes, Ms. Pierce. She just left the building," a man's voice replied. "Good God, finally. Did she cry?" "No, ma'am. Just left." "Whatever. Get facilities up here. I want this room aired out. It smells like responsibility." I heard the distinctive creak of my ergonomic chair, the one that had taken me months to get perfectly adjusted. Lydia sat down, a heavy sigh of triumph. Then, the beep-boop-beep of the speakerphone. "It's done," Lydia said into the phone. My father's voice, tinny and impatient, came through the speaker. "Did she make a scene?" "No, she just evaporated. Took one box. It was almost disappointing." "Good. She knows she's beaten. Now, the work. I had my assistant leave a packet on the desk. You see it?" "The red folder? Yes." "Sign everything I marked with a yellow tab. Don't read it, just sign it. We need to file it with legal before noon." "Father, what is this?" A rustle of thick paper, very close to the microphone. The ring. She was right next to it. "It's just the restructuring, Lydia. The price of progress." A pause. This is a workforce reduction plan, Father, the numbers on this list, it's 3 digits. This is hundreds of people. It's 340, to be exact, Graham said, his voice cold. Fat. Savannah was too sentimental. She kept all that dead weight on the books. We're bleeding profit on redundant positions. We cut them, we consolidate, and our profit margin jumps 3% by end of quarter. Your first act as CEO is a decisive one. Sign it. The video feed was grainy but clear. I could see the top of Lydia's head, her blonde hair. I saw her hand, the one with the new sapphire ring, reach out. Her fingers tapped on the desk. Tap, tap, tap. Her nervous tell, the one she's had since she was 6. Then, her hand moved and brushed against the silver ring I had left behind. She picked it up, fidgeted with it. All right, she said, her voice small, her hand tapping the coffee mug on the desk. All right, I'm signing. I watched her sign the first page, her hand holding my great-grandfather's ring. A new text from Elliot popped up on my screen. Audio stream is clear. Cross-referencing voice signatures. We have Graham on speaker giving the order, and we have her audible confirmation. The camera is capturing her signature on a document labeled Workforce Reduction. This is a chain of custody. Savannah. I looked at the text, then back at the live feed. A cold, hard smile spread across my face. Phase 2, I whispered to the empty car. Begin. I started the engine and drove away from the tower. Not back to the motel, but to the oldest part of the city, to a granite and brick building on a street lined with gas lamps. The brass plaque on the door was greened with age. Alderline and Rowe, attorneys at law, Est 1903. This was not my father's high-powered, high-rise law firm. I had found this name in Arthur Pierce's personal files, the ones I'd retrieved from a bank vault he'd opened in 1950, the key to which my grandmother had given me on her deathbed. I had made the appointment yesterday from a burner phone. I was shown into an office that smelled of old paper, lemon oil, and a century of secrets. Mr. Alderline IV, a man who looked to be in his late 70s, adjusted his spectacles. I've been wondering if one of Arthur's true descendants would ever walk in here, he said, his voice a dry rustle. You have his eyes, you have his impatience. Your father, Graham, has never set foot in this office. You know who I am? Of course. We've been monitoring the family holdings since your great-grandfather passed. We were his true executors. He gestured to a thick, leather-bound portfolio on his desk. Arthur was a builder, but he was not a fool. He saw the ambition in his son, and the avarice in his grandson, Graham. He was worried the forge would be turned from a legacy into a piggy bank. He set something up, I said, guessing. He did. Alderline opened the portfolio. In 2004, just before he died, he quietly created the Pierce Heritage Trust. He funded it with his entire personal stake in the company, 38% of the voting shares. My breath caught. 38%. That was a controlling interest. Where has it been? My father controls the board. It has been sleeping, Alderline said. The trust's bylaws, written by Arthur himself, dictate that its shares vote exactly with the majority of the board, making it invisible. It sleeps, until an activation event. He turned a page and pointed. The trust activates, and its full voting power transfers to a single, designated heir, under one condition. I quote, "Should a conscientious heir, one who has proven their dedication to the craft and the company's workforce, be unjustly removed from their operational duties by reason of internal family politics or politically motivated termination." I stared at the words. He knew. He knew this would happen. He was a good judge of character, Alderline said dryly. He wrote this clause for you, Savannah, or someone exactly like you. He just didn't know when you'd arrive. How do we activate it? What's the proof? He was very specific. Alderline ticked off the points on his fingers. 1. A formal, signed termination notice from the acting CEO. 2. Proof of said heir's competent performance prior to removal. And 3. This was the sentimental part. physical proof of the bloodline's commitment. He was worried about imposters. He pulled out another document. It was a letter, in Arthur's own hand. He said the true heir would bear his mark. He didn't mean a ring. He meant the birthmark, the one shaped like a drop of water, on the left wrist, the one your grandmother told him you were born with. I looked down at my left wrist, at the small, brown, teardrop-shaped mark I had covered with watches and bracelets my entire life. "They just fired me," I said, my voice shaking, not with fear, but with a terrible, rising power. "Lydia is signing the papers right now. My father is having them messengered to my apartment." "Then, Ms. Pierce," Mr. Alderline said, closing the book, "all we need is that messenger." Mr. Alderline slid the handwritten letter across the desk. The paper was thick, cream-colored, and the ink was a faded sepia. But the handwriting was strong, angular, and familiar. I had seen it on old company charters, on the cornerstone of the original foundry. It was Arthur Pierce's. "He wrote this to accompany the trust documents," Alderline said. "A note for the file, so to speak, or, more accurately, a note for you." I picked it up. The prose was as blunt as his steel. "When competence is ejected by cosmetic power, the shares wake up." I read it twice. Cosmetic power. He was talking about Lydia, wasn't he? Even then. "He was talking about the type," Alderline clarified. "He foresaw a time when the work would become secondary to the appearance of work. He knew your father valued presentation over production. This," he tapped the letter, "is your mandate. The activation is, as we discussed, mechanical. We need the proof." "I have the proof of competence," I said, my mind racing. "The last 5 years of operations, I have every production report, every efficiency metric, every supply chain optimization I ever implemented. I uploaded it all to a secure server last night. It's a complete timeline of my work." "Excellent. That is the second component," Alderline said, ticking a mental box. "Which leaves the first and most critical, the formal termination order, signed by the new CEO. You said it was on its way?" "They are having it messengered to my apartment. I can't be there to receive it." "You don't need to be," Alderline said. He gestured to his phone. "We have retrieval specialists. Give my associate the address. We will intercept the package legally. They will get a signature from a neighbor. It will be clean. And it will be on my desk before lunch." He was a different kind of weapon. My father had his corporate raiders. Mr. Alderline had men who intercepted legal documents on quiet streets. "And the birthmark?" I asked, looking at my own wrist. "Ah, yes. The bloodline's commitment. Arthur was a bit of a showman. He didn't trust lawyers, even his own. He wanted a final, biological lock on the trigger. A handwritten note was not enough." He swiveled his large leather chair and activated a small, discreet screen built into his credenza. He recorded this in 2009, a few months before his last revision of the trust. He was ostensibly recording his oral history for the company archives. The screen flickered to life. It was an old, standard-definition video. Arthur Pierce, looking frail, but his eyes still sharp as welding arcs, sat in his study. He was talking about the future. "A company is a living thing," he said, his voice a low rumble. "But it can be killed by the wrong blood. Not bad blood, but weak blood. Blood that cares more for the club than the foundry. I've left instructions for the one who has the work in their hands, the one who understands the steel." He leaned in, conspiratorially. "And just so you pencil pushers know I'm not crazy, I'm future-proofing this. The one I'm talking about. She's marked. Got a stamp from the universe. Right here." He pointed to his own left wrist. "A little drop of water. A tear. You find her. You check the mark. It's the only key that fits this lock." The video ended. I sat in a stunned silence. He had built this entire intricate legal mechanism, aimed at a future he could only guess at, and locked it with a mark on my skin. "As you can see," Alderline said, switching off the screen, "it is irrefutable. His video testimony, cross-referenced with your physical person and the signed termination papers, creates an unbreakable trigger. Once we file these with the Trust's holding corporation, the clock starts. Within 48 hours, the full 38% voting block of the Pierce Heritage Trust transfers from a dormant, board-aligned asset to your personal, direct control. You will be, by a significant margin, the largest single shareholder in Northbridge Forge. I should have felt triumphant. I should have felt a rush of power. Instead, I felt the crushing weight of 340 jobs. Lydia is signing a workforce reduction plan right now, I said, the words tasting like ash. She's cutting 340 people. Alderline frowned. That is aggressive and foolish. The severance costs alone will damage the quarter. She doesn't care. My father doesn't care. They see it as trimming fat. But I know those names. I know those families. If I take control now, if I walk in there in 48 hours and seize the board, the company will be in chaos. The stock will plummet. The suppliers will panic. Graham and Lydia will fight back with the fraud allegations. They'll burn the whole thing down just to spite me. And those 340 people will be the first casualties, along with the rest. What are you proposing, Ms. Pierce? I don't file, not yet. Alderline raised a white eyebrow. The trigger is primed. You wait. You risk? What? That they rehire you? I wait until I have a soft landing, I said. I can't save the company if I destroy its people. I need a lifeboat. I left Alderline's office with the original letter in my bag and a new, terrible clarity. I drove to a public park, my hands shaking so hard I could barely grip the wheel. I called Elliot. Elliot, how quickly can you build a company? Legally or functionally? He asked, his voice all business. Both. I need an entity. I need it by tomorrow. It needs to look real. It needs to have a line of credit. And it needs a CEO. You're it. I'm a strategist. Savannah, not a frontman. You are today. I'm transferring a significant portion of my personal funds to your account right now. Use your holding company to spin up a new LLC. Call it Iron Veil Systems. I want it to sound solid, like us. Iron Veil Systems. I like it, he mused. Purpose? The lifeboat, I said. Lydia just cut the heart out of the foundry's skilled labor force. I'm going to hire them. But first, I'm going to corner the supply chain. The next 24 hours were a blur of cold, precise warfare, fought entirely over secure lines and through encrypted emails from the room at the Evergreen Motel. While Elliot handled the lawyers and the banks, I made 3 calls, 3 suppliers. These were not the massive, Tier 1 conglomerates my father loved to golf with. These were the smaller, hungrier, Tier 2 specialists who provided the custom alloys, the high-grade refractory bricks, the precision tooling that Northbridge actually needed to function. They were companies run by people I'd spent years building relationships with, people who, like me, valued the work. My first call was to a man named Kovar in Pennsylvania. He ran a family-owned tooling shop. Savannah, I heard the news. Damn shame. Figured I'd be hearing from that sister of yours. She missed her first payment deadline. She'll miss more, Kovar, I said. I'm leaving Northbridge, but I'm not retiring. I'm opening a new shop, Iron Veil Systems. I want to offer you an exclusive. I'll take your entire Q1 capacity, and I'll pay you 10% above your Northbridge rate. But I need to sign today. He was silent. You don't have a shop, Savannah. I have a CEO. I have a line of credit, and I have a plan. I'm absorbing the talent Northbridge is about to fire. I'm going to be building a better product, faster, by the time Lydia figures out how to read a balance sheet. Done, he said. Send the paper. I always bet on the builder. 2 more calls, 2 more yes answers. By noon, I had locked up the 3 most critical bottlenecked components in the Northbridge supply chain. Then, I went further. I had Elliot, as CEO of Iron Veil, send a new, secondary contract to all 3. It was a conditional supply agreement with Northbridge Forge. It stipulated that Iron Veil, as the new primary distributor, would oversee quality control for all deliveries to Northbridge. "This is a masterpiece, Savannah," Elliot said, reviewing the terms. "You've inserted us. Any shipment to Northbridge now requires an Iron Veil quality control sign-off. You've given yourself a legal, contractual-based kill switch on their entire production line." "It's not a kill switch," I said. "It's a valve. I'm not going to destroy them. I'm going to apply pressure. I'm going to let Lydia's own bad decisions choke her. She'll promise deliveries she can't make. She'll face quality holds she can't explain. I'm just going to hold her to the standards I set." With the lifeboat built and the supply chain secured, I turned to the last piece, the board. My father and Lydia controlled the family votes, but there were two independent directors, two old-guard industry men who had been on the board for decades. They were not my father's yes men. They were just quiet. They voted with the majority because it was easy. It was time to make it hard. I compiled a report. It was sterile, factual, and completely anonymous. It wasn't my fraud alibi. That was my ace in the hole. This was different. This was a 5-year operational review. It showed, in stark, undeniable charts, that every division I managed saw growth, productivity up 12%, waste down by 8%. It showed the 3 new product lines I developed that now accounted for 22% of net revenue. Then, it showed a second set of data, the special projects run by Lydia's marketing department, her rebranding, her disastrous Northbridge luxury line, a string of high-cost, zero-return vanity projects, all funded by the profits from my divisions. I laid my competence next to her incompetence. I didn't add commentary. I didn't need to. The numbers screamed. I sent the package from a public library computer, using a Proton Mail account, to their 2 home addresses. The package contained the report and a single typed question on the cover sheet. "At the next quarterly meeting, please ask Lydia Pierce to explain her plan to maintain operational efficiency and quality control now that the COO who built this revenue has been terminated." The trap was set, the legal mechanism was ready, the lifeboat was in the water, the supply chain was mine, and the board was about to feel the first sharp prick of doubt. I had my counterfile ready. My alibi was iron. My timeline of operational decisions was my sword and shield. All I had to do now was wait for them to make the next mistake. And I knew. From the live feed still quietly transmitting from the ring on my old desk, they would not disappoint me. The first board meeting with Lydia as CEO was a disaster, and I had a front-row seat from the privacy of my motel room. The audio from the ring was crystal clear, a live feed of her unraveling. The anonymous report I'd sent to the independent directors, Mr. Davies and Mrs. Chen, had done its job. They were no longer quiet. "Lydia, I'm looking at the Q4 projections." Davies's voice, dry as old paper, crackled through the feed. "And I'm seeing a 3% slip in our profit margin. Our biggest clients, G-Tech, Aerodyne, their new orders are all flagged pending. Why are they delaying?" I heard Lydia's nervous tap-tap-tap on her coffee mug. "It's a temporary fluctuation. Mr. Davies, just a standard market adjustment." "It's not an adjustment. Lydia." Mrs. Chen cut in, her voice sharp. "It's a pause. I spoke with G-Tech's purchasing head. He's concerned about the recent operational shakeup." Those were his words. He said, and I quote, "The person who guaranteed our quality control is gone." He's talking about Savannah. "What, exactly, is your plan to reassure our 2 largest accounts?" Silence. The tap-tap-tap became frantic. I have a plan," Lydia finally stammered. "A much bigger plan, not just maintenance, growth, strategic growth." I heard her stand, the scrape of her chair. She was going to her presentation board. "I'm sure you're all familiar with Halcyon Ridge Partners," she announced, her voice regaining a brittle, arrogant sheen. "They are one of the most respected private equity firms in the country. I've been in negotiations with them for weeks. They see the new vision. They are prepared to make a strategic investment of $20 million in exchange for a 12% stake in Northbridge Forge." My blood ran cold. 20 million, 12%. She was selling off a piece of the company. She was diluting the trust's power. My power. Before I could even use it, she was trying to buy her way out of her own incompetence. That's a significant move, Davies said, his voice cautious. That requires a full board review. Lydia, evaluation, due diligence. Of course, Lydia said, her voice dripping with false confidence. And they're eager to begin. In fact, they've invited me to speak at their annual industry summit in Denver tomorrow, a keynote. They want to announce our new partnership. I disconnected from the feed. Elliot, I said into my secure phone. She's diluting. She's bringing in a partner. Halcyon Ridge Partners. I know them, Elliot said immediately. Tough, smart. They won't be fooled by Lydia. I can't risk it, I said. I can't let them get a foothold. If they buy 12%, my 38% is weakened. I need to kill this deal. Elliot, I need to kill it publicly. How? They're a private firm. They don't do public announcements. Lydia does, I said, a bitter, ugly idea forming. She's speaking at their summit tomorrow. She's going to announce it. She's desperate for a media win. We can't stop her from speaking. No, I said, but we can change the story. Is Ironvale Systems ready for a press release? It's a legal entity, Savannah. It's not a thing. It is now. Elliot worked all night. I didn't need to create a fake Halcyon. I just needed to create a different, more compelling story. The next morning, Lydia walked onto the stage at the Denver summit. The event was being live-streamed to several industry news sites. She was wearing a bright red suit, a warrior's color. She was glowing, triumphant. She began her speech, a canned, empty monologue about synergy and forward-facing paradigms. At exactly 10:15 a.m., just as she was building to her big announcement, a press release hit the wire. Ironvale Systems, New Colorado Industrial Consortium, announces acquisition of key Northbridge Forge supply contracts, cites operational instability at former partner. The release was a work of art. It announced Elliot as CEO. It detailed our exclusive contracts with the 3 suppliers, the ones I'd secured, but the real poison was in the quote Elliot had crafted. While we wish Northbridge Forge the best, his statement read, our primary duty is to ensure quality and stability for the end user. The recent abrupt removal of their entire senior operations team and the subsequent mass layoffs have created a transparency vacuum. We cannot, in good faith, rely on their current leadership's ability to meet critical deadlines. Therefore, Ironvale is stepping in to manage these vital supply chains directly. It hit the industry feeds. I watched on my laptop as the first journalist in the conference audience, a man from Steel and Market, looked down at his phone. His eyes widened. Lydia was still talking. A new era of partnership, a $20 million validation of... The journalist stood up, right in the middle of her speech. Ms. Pierce, can you comment on the Ironvale Systems release? The one that says your company is operationally unstable and that they've seized your supply contracts? Lydia froze. The camera was on her. She had no idea what he was talking about. I don't know what you... A second journalist, this one from a Denver business journal, stood up. The release also cites a transparency vacuum following the ouster of your sister. Savannah Pierce, is this the new direction you promised? Is your company falling apart? Her smile was still plastered on her face, but it was a rictus. The color drained from her cheeks. The feed was live. I was watching my sister, the media darling, the cosmetic power, be eviscerated in real time. She was a CEO for less than a week, and she had already, publicly, lost control of her own supply chain. No, she stammered. That's a lie, a fabrication. We are strong. We have partners, Halcyon Ridge. It was too late. The news of instability was out. A public firefight. The one thing real investors hate. Lydia, a man's voice called from offstage, a summit organizer. We need to take a break. They cut the feed. The fallout was immediate. By 2 p.m., Halcyon Ridge Partners had released their own one-sentence statement. Halcyon Ridge is not in active negotiations with Northbridge Forge. It was a public, brutal execution. They had run from her. I was still watching the dead feed when my phone buzzed with the audio from the ring. It had just been activated. Lydia was back in the office. She wasn't crying. She was raging. I heard a crash, a thud. "Ah!" she screamed, a sound that was half sob, half roar. Another crash, I realized. With a jolt, she was throwing the presentation boards against the wall. "Savannah!" She shrieked my name, a long, primal scream of pure hatred. It echoed in the empty office, and it echoed in my cheap motel room. "I will kill her." Another thwack as she hit something. "She did this. She's out there. And she did this. Father, she did this." I listened to her destroy the office for 5 more minutes. I listened to her weep, the ugly, gasping sobs of a bully who had just been punched in the mouth. I should have felt victorious. I had won. I had publicly humiliated her. I had saved the company from her idiotic deal. Instead, I just felt empty. I put the phone down, the sound of her sobs still leaking from the earpiece. The thrill was gone. The cold, precise anger that had fueled me for days had burned out, leaving nothing but a hollow ache. I had set out to get justice for my great-grandfather, but this felt different. This felt small. I looked at the motel room, the stained carpet, the smell of bleach. I had become this, a person living in the shadows, listening to her sister's breakdown on a secret microphone, pulling strings to destroy her. I had become my father. The thought hit me so hard I had to sit down on the edge of the bed. What was the true goal? To get the company back? Or to punish them? And if I got it back, what then? Would I be any different? The pleasure of the attack was gone, replaced by a cold, gray fog. I was in a war of my own making, and I suddenly wasn't sure what victory even looked like. My secure phone, the one from Elliot, buzzed. A text message. It wasn't from him. The number was blocked, routed through 3 different encryption services. The message was one short sentence. "Don't fight tomorrow. They've set you up for something worse." I stared at it. Worse? What was worse than the fraud allegation? What was worse than what they'd already done? I called Elliot. "I just got a blind text. Someone's warning me off. Can you trace it?" "A warning? About what?" "It just says, 'Something worse. Trace it. Elliot, I need to know who this is.'" It took him 2 hours. The dead-end trails, the proxy servers. He was a ghost hunting a ghost. "I found it," he finally said, his voice strained. "The original signal. It's not a who, it's a where." The text was sent from a desktop terminal inside the Northbridge Forge Tower, from the legal department. "Someone in-house? Who?" "I don't know, Savannah, but they're taking a huge risk." As if on cue. My secure laptop chimed. A new file had arrived in the anvil. It was from the same anonymous source. It wasn't a text file. It was a scanned document, a 50-page draft. A secret merger agreement. I opened it. My blood didn't just run cold. It stopped. It was a deal between Northbridge Forge and a foreign conglomerate I'd never heard of. Stellark Industrial. I scanned the terms. It wasn't a merger. It was a hostile acquisition. Disguised as a partnership, Stellark would acquire controlling interest. And the terms. Page 24. Post-merger operational synergies. It was a plan to close the Lake Haven foundry, to move all production offshore within 12 months. It was a labor force reduction of 60%, not just the 340, 60% of the entire company. My great-grandfather's life's work. Sold, gutted, shipped overseas. And then I saw the signature page, the fee schedule. A $25 million consulting and advisory fee to be paid upon closing, not to Northbridge Forge, to a shell company. The Ravenhall Custodial Trust. They weren't just trying to frame me for $9 million. They were trying to steal $25 million more. This was the real plan, the fraud, my firing. It was all a distraction. Graham wasn't just seating his daughter, he was cashing out. He was burning the entire company to the ground to cover his escape. And they needed Lydia to do it. The agreement was between Stellark and Northbridge. It needed the CEO's signature. My father was going to have Lydia sign a document that would liquidate her own company, destroy her own future, and fire thousands of people, all so he could collect $25 million in Antigua. He was using her, just as he had used me. The plan was clear. They had to get me out of the way, because I would have read the fine print. I would have seen the Stellark deal for what it was. Lydia, desperate for a win after her public humiliation, would sign anything that looked like a partnership. She wouldn't read it. My father was counting on it. A new, colder anger rose in me. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This wasn't about my hurt feelings. This was about the soul of the company. I looked back at the Ring's audio feed. Lydia had cried herself out. I heard my father's voice, now calm and paternal, soothing her. "It's all right, sweetheart. That bitch, your sister, she shot her last bullet. She's ruined. Now, I have a real partner for you, a real deal, much bigger than Halcyon. They're sending the papers tomorrow. You just sign them, and all this goes away. You'll be a hero." I looked at the file on my screen, the Stellark merger, the 60% cut. I looked at the text message. "Don't fight tomorrow." I finally understood. The game wasn't about the fraud allegation. That was the trap they wanted me to fight. I looked at the file Lydia had signed on her first day, the one I had on audio and video, the workforce reduction for 340 people. I pulled up the Northbridge corporate bylaws, a file I knew by heart. Article 47. Any reduction in force affecting more than 100 salaried employees, or 10% of the active labor force, requires a supermajority approval from the full board of directors. Any CEO enacting such a reduction unilaterally is in material breach of their fiduciary duty and subject to immediate review and removal. She had already done it, on her first day, at her father's command. The trap wasn't for me. The trap was for Lydia, and she was already in it. The chaos after the Halcyon Ridge implosion was immediate. Lydia, desperate to stop the bleeding, had promised the board she would handle the supply chain personally. This was the opening I needed. "She's desperate, Elliot," I said from the motel room, which was now my war room, the walls covered in printouts of shipping manifests and contracts. "Her clients are screaming. Her board is skeptical. She's looking for a miracle. We're going to sell her one." Elliot had already anticipated this. "I've established a new entity, a subsidiary of Iron Veil, insulated by 2 layers of Delaware holding companies. It's called the Forge Line Consortium. It sounds old. It sounds like us. It sounds expensive." "Perfect," I said. "Forge Line will approach Northbridge, not as a supplier, but as a supply chain stabilization partner, a high-end consultant group that, for a significant fee, will step in to manage the crisis she created." "And the contract?" "Article 12, Section 4, I said. "Read it to me." "It's my favorite bedtime story," Elliot replied, his voice dry. Article 12, Point 4. To ensure holistic quality control and protect against client-side disruptions, all production schedule modifications, accelerations, or delays impacting Tier 1 clients must be submitted for review and consensus approval by the consortium. Consensus approval, I repeated, savoring the words. "And who is the consortium?" "You and me, Savannah, you and me." Lydia didn't even hesitate. The audio from the Ring was a symphony of her relief. We heard her meet with the Forge Line representative, a high-priced lawyer Elliot had hired for the day. We heard Lydia, eager and relieved, praise his proactive stance. Yes, this is exactly what we need," she said, the sound of her pen scratching on paper. "A partner to get things moving again." She signed a $5 million emergency retainer and a 40-page stabilization contract without reading past the executive summary. She had just paid us, her enemy, $5 million to legally take control of her own production line. The trap was set. Now, we waited for her to step in it. It took less than a week. G-Tech, our biggest client, the one whose calls Lydia had been dodging, finally issued an ultimatum. Deliver the pending Q4 order in 10 days, or they would cancel the entire $26 million annual contract and sue for damages. Lydia, high on the success of her new Forge Line partnership, got on a conference call. I listened, via the ring, as she projected a confidence she clearly did not feel. "Mark, listen, I understand your frustration," she cooed, addressing the G-Tech CEO. "The transition has had speed bumps, but I have personally put a new stabilization team in place. I can absolutely guarantee your shipment will be on a truck by the 10th of next month. You have my personal word." The G-Tech CEO grunted his assent and hung up. Lydia let out a whoop of triumph. "See?" she yelled to the empty office. "That's how it's done." She immediately called the foundry floor supervisor, one of my loyalists. "This is Lydia Pierce. I want the G-Tech order expedited. Full capacity. Start it now." "Ma'am," the supervisor said, his voice flat. "The Forge Line contract. It says I can't reschedule a run without their sign-off." "What? That's just a formality. It's our own vendor. I hired them. Just do it." I can't, ma'am. It's my job. I have to file the request." I watched the request hit the Forge Line dashboard, the secure portal Elliot and I shared. Request, expedite G-Tech order. I hit deny. The reason, I typed, was simple. Per Article 12, Section 4, this acceleration request is denied pending a full-scale quality assurance and materials appraisal by the consortium. This is to ensure schedule integrity for all clients. Our appraisal team will be on site within 30 business days. The explosion was audible from my motel room, even without the ring's audio. I'm sure they heard her on the foundry floor. The audio feed from her office became a stream of pure, unadulterated panic. I heard her shriek at her assistant. I heard her get the supervisor on the phone and threaten to fire him. He simply read the contract clause back to her. Finally, I heard her call our father. She did it again," Lydia sobbed. "Forge Line. It's her. It has to be. I'm trapped. The contract says I can't. I can't do anything without their permission. I'm paying them, and they're choking me." "Calm down, Lydia." Graham's voice was ice. "You signed this? You told me to fix the supply chain. I fixed it. You signed a contract giving an outside vendor veto power on our production?" he roared. "Are you an idiot? The Stellark deal is in 48 hours. If we can't guarantee production, they'll walk. You've ruined us." "Me?" she shrieked. "Me? You're the one who told me to sign the reduction papers. You're the one who— Ooh. The line went dead. He had hung up on her. The next call, I knew, would be to the board. The emergency board meeting was convened in 2 hours. I listened as Mr. Davies and Mrs. Chen grilled Lydia. "Let me be clear," Davies said, his voice shaking with anger. "You have signed away our operational autonomy? To a group we've never heard of? Who are these people?" Lydia was crying. I'm looking into it. It's a legal matter." While they were screaming about Forge Line, I was in a taxi, heading to Mr. Alderline's office. The time was now. The operational chaos was the perfect cover for the legal execution. I walked into the quiet, wood-paneled office. "Mr. Alderline," I said, "it's time." I placed the intercepted termination notice on his desk, the one with Lydia's signature. I placed my 5-year operational review next to it, and I placed my left wrist on his desk, next to the papers. He looked at the teardrop-shaped birthmark. He looked at the termination notice. He looked at the cover sheet of my performance review. "Arthur's 3-part test," he murmured. "Termination, competence, and the mark, all satisfied." He turned to his computer. "I am filing the activation notice with the Trust's administrators, effective immediately. As of this moment, 38% of the voting shares of Northbridge Forge are in motion. They will be in your complete control in 48 hours. Good, I said. Now for the second item. Second? I want to call an emergency general meeting of the shareholders. Alderline looked confused. Ms. Pierce, Savannah, you won't need to. In 48 hours, you'll be the controlling shareholder. You can just walk in and fire them all. I'm not going to fire them. Mr. Alderline, I'm going to let the company charter do it. I'm going to hold them accountable. This can't look like a coup. It has to look like a legal proceeding. It has to be clean. I slid another document across his desk, the Northbridge Corporate Bylaws. I had it open to Article 47. The CEO, I said, pointing, cannot authorize a workforce reduction of more than 100 employees without full board approval. Lydia Pierce signed an order to fire 340 people on her first day. I have the audio of my father telling her to do it, and I have the video of her signing it. Alderline's eyes went wide. That's a material breach, a nuclear-level breach of fiduciary duty. Exactly. The trust is my power. Article 47 is my justification. I want you to send the EGM notice. Send it now, to every shareholder. Send it via legal courier to my father and to my sister. By the bylaws, they have 48 hours to respond and attend. The next 47 hours were the loudest silence of my life. Elliot, who had relocated to a suite at the Four Seasons, was my intelligence officer. Graham is incandescent, he reported. The EGM notice hit their desks at 4 p.m. He's retained 3, Savannah, 3 different law firms, 1 in New York, 2 in Denver. He's paying them a fortune to find a loophole in Article 47. And? They can't. The bylaw is ironclad. It's one of Arthur's originals. They're trying to argue the reduction hasn't been fully implemented, but her signature on the order is a binding corporate act. She did it. It's over. They're trying to find a way to discredit the meeting's sponsor. They're going to bring the fraud allegations. Good, I said. Let them. You have the package? Ready to go, Elliot said. The media box, as you call it. The video of Arthur. The metadata proving it's from 2009. The original, unedited audio from the ring. Graham's voice. Lydia's voice. The signature. It's all verified, time-stamped, and ready for a courtroom. Or a boardroom. I disconnected. I spent that last night not at the motel, but at my own, empty apartment. I had slept on a cheap bed for a week, but I slept soundly now. The next morning, I did not put on my old armor. I didn't wear the gray suit. I chose a simple, dark blue dress, no jewelry, save for a simple watch. I drove myself to the Northbridge Tower. I didn't park in the visitor's lot. I parked in the spot that was still technically, legally, mine. I walked into the lobby. The regular security guards saw me. They didn't stop me. One of them, a man named Tom, just nodded at me, his face grim. Good luck, Ms. Pierce. I rode the elevator, not to my old floor. I rode it to the 40th, the executive boardroom. I would go in alone, no army, no lawyers. Alderline had done his job. Elliot had done his. This last part was mine. The elevator doors opened onto a hushed, gray-carpeted lobby. The boardroom doors, 2 massive slabs of carved oak, were at the end of the hall. I could hear the low murmur of voices from within. They were all in there. My father, my sister, the board, their lawyers. I walked down the hall, my heels sinking into the carpet. I stopped just outside the doors. I took one deep breath. I could feel the thrum of the building around me. The company my great-grandfather had built, the one my father had tried to sell, the one I was about to take back. I raised my left hand. I looked at the small, brown mark, the drop of water that had been there since my birth. I touched it, just once, a seal of a promise made before I was born. Then I pushed open the doors and walked in. When I pushed open the doors, the conversation stopped. It didn't just fade. It was severed, as if by a knife. 20 pairs of eyes turned to me, the entire executive board, my father, my sister, and a half-dozen lawyers I didn't recognize. their expensive suits looking stiff and unnatural in our boardroom. My father, Graham, sat at the head of the table, his face a mask of thunderous rage. Lydia was next to him, pale, her eyes wide and rimmed in red. She looked like a cornered animal. "What is the meaning of this?" Graham boomed, his voice accustomed to obedience. "This is a private meeting. You were terminated." My presence was requested. "Father," I said, my voice carrying easily in the acoustically perfect room. I walked to the single empty chair at the far end of the table, the one opposite him. "This is an emergency general meeting of shareholders, and I am a shareholder." Mr. Davies, the independent director, cleared his throat. He looked exhausted, but his eyes were firm. "She is correct. Graham, Ms. Pierce's name is on the convocation notice. This meeting is now in session. As acting chairman for this specific matter, I will read the motion." He put on his glasses and read from the paper in front of him. "This meeting has been called by a valid shareholder block to address a single item, a vote of no confidence in the acting CEO, Lydia Pierce, for a material breach of fiduciary duty, specifically citing Article 47 of the corporate bylaws, regarding the unilateral authorization of a workforce reduction in excess of 100 employees. One of the New York lawyers, a man with silver hair and a shark smile, immediately stood. "Mr. Chairman, this entire meeting is a sham. The so-called shareholder block that convened it is based on fraudulent proxy documents. We have reason to believe—" "I'll speak for myself," Lydia interrupted, her voice high and shrill. She stood up, her hands flat on the table. "This is a joke. This is my crazy, jealous sister trying to undo everything. The trust she's claiming, it's fake. It's a fantasy. I demand a full 30-day postponement to validate these imaginary documents. You can't just walk in here." She was floundering, relying on volume instead of facts. My father was letting her, watching the board's reaction. "There will be no postponement. Lydia," I said. I walked from my chair to the head of the table, carrying my laptop. I unplugged the main presentation monitor and plugged my own cable into the port. "What do you think you're doing?" Graham snarled. "This is not your—" My screen flickered to life, projected onto the 80-inch monitor behind him. It was just my desktop. "My authority is not based on a proxy. Lydia, it's based on a mandate," I said. I opened a video file. My father and sister are new to the company's history. I'm sure some of you on the board, however, will remember Arthur Pierce. I pressed play. The video, grainy, from 2009, filled the screen. Arthur, my great-grandfather, frail but his eyes still burning. He was in his study, speaking to the camera. "A company is a living thing." His voice, a low rumble, filled the silent room. "But it can be killed by the wrong blood, not bad blood, but weak blood." I saw Lydia's confused look. My father's jaw was clenched. He didn't know this video existed. "I've left instructions for the one who has the work in their hands," Arthur continued. "The one who understands the steel. She's marked, got a stamp from the universe, right here." On screen, he pointed to his own left wrist. "A little drop of water, a tear. You find her. You check the mark. It's the only key that fits this lock." I stopped the video. I walked back to my chair, and in the dead, ringing silence, I held up my left arm and pushed back the sleeve of my dress. I held my wrist out for all of them to see. The small, brown, teardrop-shaped mark was stark against my skin. It's a trick," Lydia stammered, but her voice had no conviction. "Mr. Chairman," I said, "I have one more piece of evidence." I tapped a key on my laptop. A new window opened. It was the metadata for the video file. "This is the original, raw file, retrieved from the company archives, to which I still have access as a shareholder. I'd invite corporate counsel to verify the metadata. You'll find the creation date is March 10th, 2009. It has not been opened, altered, or edited since." Our chief counsel, a man my father had hired, stepped forward. He looked at the screen for a long, agonizing minute. He checked the file properties. He ran a diagnostic. He finally turned, his face pale. "He's correct. Mr. Pierce," the lawyer said to my father. "The file is an original, no edits. The timestamp is genuine." All the air went out of the room. My father's face went from red to a blotchy, sick gray. It's just a birthmark," Lydia whispered, her eyes wide with panic. "It doesn't mean anything. Mom, tell them. It's just a thing. Tell them." She turned to our mother, Elaine, who was sitting in a chair against the wall, as far from the table as possible, a silent observer. My mother, who had not said a word. Elaine's face was a mask of tears. She was looking at my wrist, and then at the frozen image of Arthur on the screen. She was rocking back and forth, ever so slightly. "Elaine!" Graham barked. "This is nonsense. Tell them." My mother stood up. Her hands were trembling. I remember when he saw her," she whispered, her voice barely audible, but it cut through the silence like a razor. "Arthur, in the hospital, when Savannah was born." "Elaine, sit down," Graham commanded. He came in," she continued, her voice gaining a strange, lost strength. "He looked at her, in my arms. He pushed back the blanket. He saw the mark, and he laughed." She looked at me, her eyes seeing me for the first time in years. "He laughed, and he said, 'Well, there she is, the key.' I thought he was just an old man, rambling. I never—" She dissolved into sobs, her hand covering her mouth. "It's real. He knew. It's real." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb. My father's lawyers were staring at their notepads. Lydia looked as if she had been slapped. Mr. Davies took off his glasses and wiped them, his hand shaking. He put them back on. The validity of the Pierce Heritage Trust and Ms. Savannah Pierce's control of its 38% voting bloc has been established. We will now proceed to the vote on the motion. "This is an outrage," Graham shouted, standing up. "I will not—" "Sit down, Graham," Mrs. Chen snapped, "or I will have security remove you. You are a shareholder here, nothing more. The vote." "All in favor," Davies said, his voice a gavel, "of the removal of Lydia Pierce as CEO for cause, under Article 47. My hand went up. Mr. Davies's hand went up. Mrs. Chen's hand went up. 2 other directors, men who had been quiet for years, slowly, one by one, raised their hands. "The motion carries," Davies said, his voice flat. "By a vote of 66%, Lydia Pierce is hereby removed as Chief Executive Officer, effective immediately. We will have it noted in the minutes. The board will require a new—" "I have a second motion," Mrs. Chen said, her voice like ice. "I move to appoint Savannah Pierce as interim CEO and president, effective immediately, to stabilize operations and begin a full financial review." "Second," said Davies. "All in favor?" My hand. Davies, Chen, the same 2 directors, another, who had abstained on the first vote, raised his— "The motion carries," Davies said, a note of finality in his voice. 71%. Congratulations, Madam CEO. The meeting is adjourned." It was over, just like that. The lawyers snapped their briefcases shut. My father, his face purple, pointed a shaking finger at me. "You will regret this. This is not over." He grabbed Lydia's arm, who was frozen, staring blankly at the video screen. "Lydia, we're leaving." I watched them go. The room emptied. Davies and Chen nodded at me. "We'll be in your office at 9 a.m. tomorrow, Madam CEO," Davies said, and they, too, were gone. I was alone in the silent boardroom. I had not celebrated. I had not smiled. I felt no triumph, just the immense, crushing weight of what came next. The corporate secretary, a woman named June, was quietly gathering her papers. "June," I said. She started. "Yes, Madam CEO. Please schedule a company-wide, all-hands meeting, town hall format. I want to speak to everyone. The foundry, the office, logistics, everyone, in 48 hours. "Yes, ma'am," she said, and scurried out. I walked to the head of the table, to my old office, Lydia's office. I heard a sound, a quiet beep. The ring? I pulled out my secure phone. The audio feed was still active. It was in Lydia's pocket, or her purse. I heard her muffled sobs. Then, my father's voice, in the elevator. "Don't you understand what you've done?" he was hissing. "You signed the Forge Line contract. You signed the reduction. You handed her the gun." "You told me to," Lydia shrieked, her voice a raw wound. "You told me to sign it. The reduction. The Stellark deal. You said just to sign. I signed it without understanding. Daddy, I just did what you said." The audio cut out as they stepped out of range. I closed the app. She had admitted it. He had ordered it. And she was, in the end, just as much his victim as I was. I sat down in the CEO's chair. It was still my old chair. Lydia hadn't even had time to change it. On the desk, in a small silver frame, was the handwritten letter from Arthur that Alderline had given me. I picked it up. "Win with humanity, or don't win at all." I closed my eyes. The weight of the victory was heavier than the defeat. My personal phone, the one I hadn't used in a week, buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is St. Jude's Hospital. We are treating Lydia Pierce. She was admitted for an acute panic attack. You are listed as her emergency contact." I stared at the words. Me, after everything. I was her emergency contact. She had no one else. I stood up. I grabbed my keys. I had to go. She was my sister. I was in the elevator, my hand on the button for the lobby. When my secure phone rang, it was Elliot. "Savannah, don't go to the hospital," he said, his voice urgent. "What? Why, she's..." "Not that. The other thing. The real thing. Remember that $25 million in the Ravenhall Trust? The consulting fee for the Stellark deal? I was tracing its origin. It's not just a fee, Savannah. It's a payout." "A payout for what?" "I don't know," he said. "But something is wrong. I dug into the old files, the ones from 2009, the year Arthur died." "What about it?" "His death. It was ruled a heart attack, but I found something, a file I shouldn't have, a preliminary, toxicology report. It was buried. It was never part of the final record." "Elliot," I said, my blood turning to ice. "What did it say?" "His blood was full of something that doesn't belong. I'm sending it to you now. But Savannah, your mother, Elaine, she was the one who signed off on the cremation, overriding Arthur's will, which specified a burial." My phone chimed. The report was there. I looked at the text from the hospital. I looked at the file from Elliot. I stabbed the button for the parking garage. I got in my car. I drove past the exit for the hospital. I drove straight to my mother's house. I pulled up to the curb. She was home. The lights were on. I opened the toxicology report. I had to read it. I had to understand it. I had to hear, from her, why she had signed that cremation order. I had to know what she had done. I drove through the streets of Lake Haven, my hands gripping the wheel, but I wasn't seeing the road. I was seeing the words on the file Elliot had sent. The preliminary toxicology report, buried for over a decade. It wasn't a heart attack. My great-grandfather, Arthur Pierce, had been murdered. The report was clinical, sterile, but the conclusion was a scream. Elevated inorganic arsenic levels consistent with chronic long-term exposure. A 6-month poisoning, administered in careful, steady doses to mimic the slow decline of cardiac failure. I didn't go to the hospital. I drove to my mother's house. I used my old key. The door clicked open into the silent, perfect foyer. She was in the den, sitting in the dark, a silhouette against the window. "You got the text," she whispered. Her voice was a dry leaf. "Lydia, is she—" "I didn't go," I said. I didn't move from the doorway. "I'm here about Arthur." She made a small, broken sound. "I'm here about his cremation, Mother." She flinched, a violent, full-body rejection of the word. He wanted to be buried," she stammered. "He had a plot, next to your grandmother." "But you had him cremated. You signed the order. You overrode his will, his explicit instructions. Why?" I held up my secure phone, the toxicology report glowing in the dim light. Was it to hide this? She didn't need to read it. She knew. The sob that tore out of her was a confession 15 years in the making. "I was afraid," she wept, the words collapsing. "I was so afraid of him, of Graham." "Afraid of what?" I demanded, my voice hard. "Afraid of what you knew?" "I didn't know," she insisted, clutching her housecoat. I suspected. He had a new company, just for a year. He said, around the time Arthur got sick, a pest control supply business. He said it was a tax write-off. Elliot's research had already flagged it. A shell company, active for 12 months, with permits to handle restricted agricultural chemicals, arsenic. "I found something," she continued, her voice rattling. "At the lake house, in the old shed. I was cleaning after the funeral. It was an old medicine bottle, an amber glass bottle with a dropper, hidden, under a loose floorboard. I smelled it. It smelled like garlic, like almonds. The classic bitter scent of the poison. I knew," she choked out. "I knew it was what he'd used. I confronted him, Graham. I asked him, and he smiled. Savannah, he smiled at me, and he said, 'Elaine, you are the mother of my children. Don't you ever ask me that again, or you might lose them, too.' So I signed the papers. I signed the cremation order. I was a coward. I was so scared." "Where is it?" I said, my voice flat. "The bottle." I couldn't destroy it. I couldn't keep it. I put it in a box, with my old college things. It's in a storage unit, off the highway." It took 20 minutes. We stood in the cold, buzzing fluorescent light of the suburban storage hallway. She opened the metal door. The unit smelled of mildew and time. She pointed to a single, moldering banker's box. I didn't touch it. I called Elliot. "I need your specialist, the forensics one. Unit 408. Bring a kit and a warrant." "A warrant?" Elliot's voice was sharp. "The FBI has been tracking Graham's financial fraud," I said, the pieces clicking into place with a horrifying metallic snap. "The $9 million I was framed for, the $25 million consulting fee in the Stellark deal. They've been building a RICO case, but they needed a motive for the final theft, for the plan to burn the whole company down. They needed a why. He wasn't just cashing out. He was destroying the evidence. He's been stealing from this company since before Arthur died." "And Arthur found out," Elliot finished. "So Graham killed him. The arsenic. The murder gives them motive. Savannah. It connects the fraud, the theft, and the murder into one single, 15-year-long conspiracy. I'm calling them. The feds are already on their way." We waited. My mother sat on the cold concrete floor, a woman who had ceased to exist 15 years ago. Elliot's specialist arrived. He was quiet, gloved. He opened the box. He pulled out the small, amber, glass-stoppered bottle. He ran a field test. He just looked at me and nodded. "This isn't just arsenic," he said. "This is a compounding, the dosage. It's measured. The concentration is high enough to kill, but low enough to be slow. This was a schedule. This was a 6-month execution." My phone rang. Not the secure phone. My new, official Northbridge CEO phone. The display read, "Fire, Off-Site Archive." "Madam CEO," a panicked voice yelled. "We have a full alarm at the paper storage facility. The perimeter is secure, but the internal smoke sensors have... "Who is inside?" I demanded, already running to my car. "That's the problem. Ma'am, the system shows the building was accessed 2 minutes ago with a valid executive key card. It was Ms. Lydia Pierce's card. I broke every speed limit. The off-site archive was a low, windowless concrete bunker that held every piece of paper Northbridge Forge had generated before the year 2010. The old ledgers, the real books, Arthur's books. I slammed on the brakes. There were no flames, no smoke, just flashing lights and 2 police cars. I ran inside. The manager met me in the hall. What happened? Where is the fire? There isn't one, ma'am, he said, his face pale. The system. It worked, thank God. He pointed into the massive archive room. The rows of steel shelves were intact, but the entire room, floor to ceiling, was coated in a thick, white, wet foam. The laser smoke detectors sensed ignition, he said. The system activated. It's a high-expansion chemical foam. Total room saturation in less than 2 seconds. It suffocates the fire instantly. Where is my sister? He pointed to the security monitor. He rewound the feed. There she was, Lydia. Her face was a mask of terror. She was holding a red gasoline can. She was splashing it on the boxes marked 1998 and 1999. She pulled out a lighter. The footage showed the spark, and in the next frame, the world simply vanished under a torrent of white foam erupting from the ceiling. Lydia screamed, a sound I couldn't hear, dropped the can, and was knocked off her feet by the force of the suppression system. She scrambled out on her hands and knees, completely soaked, blinded, and terrified. She had run straight into the parking lot and into the arms of the police officers responding to the automatic alarm. I walked outside. They had her in the back of a squad car. She was shivering. Her hair matted, the foam dripping from her expensive clothes. She wasn't an executive. She wasn't my sister. She was just a drenched, failed arsonist. When she saw me, her face crumpled. "Savannah," she sobbed, her voice thick. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "Why, Lydia? The insurance money?" A policewoman stepped in front of me. "Ma'am, you'll need to step back. We found this." She held up Lydia's phone in an evidence bag. She made a call 2 hours ago to her insurance broker, asking hypothetical questions about fire damage payouts on a commercial property. He made me." Lydia wept from the car. "He called me. From the hospital. He said you knew. He said you'd find the old books. He said I had to. I had to burn it, to protect the family. He said it was the only way." He was protecting himself. "Lydia," I said, my voice empty. "I know," she shrieked, pressing her face to the glass. "I know. I was always so afraid of him." "Wait, Savannah, wait." The officer was closing the door. "I have recordings," Lydia screamed, her voice desperate. "Of him, for years. I recorded him, for protection, in case he ever turned on me." I stopped. I turned back. Lydia was babbling to the officer. It's on a USB drive, taped under the sink, my bathroom at the estate. Please, get it. Give it to her. Just give it to her." An hour later, an officer returned from the estate and handed me a small black USB drive. I sat in my car, outside the ruined archive, and plugged it into my laptop. It was dozens of files, snippets of calls, arguments, but one file was labeled 15 years ago. I clicked it. The audio was muffled, as if from a pocket, a teenager's voice. "Lydia." "But why? Daddy? Why are we selling the lake house? Grandfather loved it." And then, my father's voice, Graham, younger, stronger, and utterly, chillingly cold. "The old man suspects the books. Lydia, he's been poking around. It's time to clean house. Don't you worry. We'll shuffle the accounts. We'll liquidate the properties. It will all be over soon. It will look natural." A pause, then Lydia's small voice. "What will look natural, Daddy?" His laugh, a short, sharp, empty sound. "The future, sweetheart, the future." I closed the laptop. The recording was a confession, of intent, of the motive, of the murder. My secure phone buzzed. It was Elliot. "They're moving," he said. His voice clipped. "The FBI just hit the gates. They have warrants for the house, for Graham's office. They're seizing everything. His devices, his encrypted emails, his offshore account records. It's over. Savannah, they've got him." The fall was not a slow decline. It was an amputation. The federal government, armed with 15 years of motive, a murder weapon, a financial paper trail, and a confession on a USB drive, moved with terrifying, unfeeling precision. The charges against my father were a corporate epitaph: wire fraud, embezzlement, securities fraud, conspiracy, and elevated from the dusty, buried toxicology report, second-degree murder. The state added its own, but the federal case was the one that would bury him. His bail hearing was a formality. The U.S. attorney argued he was a profound flight risk, citing the tens of millions in offshore accounts and the sheer, calculated malice of his crimes. The judge agreed. Bail was denied. They didn't arrest him at the estate. They didn't arrest him at the office. The FBI let him drive to his 11 a.m. tea time at the Lake Haven Country Club, the most exclusive, arrogant, and insulated pocket of privilege in the state. They let him order his drink. They let him line up his first shot on the pristine green. And then, in front of his golfing buddies, the bankers, the judges, and the other CEOs, they walked onto the fairway, their blue windbreakers a jarring slash of color on the perfect grass, and they put him in handcuffs. I watched it on the local news, a grainy helicopter shot. The man who had ruled my life, who had killed his own father-in-law, who had tried to destroy both his daughters, being led away, his golf cleats slipping on the path, his face a mask of purple, incoherent rage. It was a pathetic, small end to a large, terrible life. Lydia's case was more complicated. She was charged with attempted arson, conspiracy, and insurance fraud. The evidence was absolute. The phone call, the security footage, the gasoline can. She was facing serious, hard time. She was sitting in a holding cell, bail set at $250,000. She had no one. My father's assets were frozen. My mother was a ghost. I went to the courthouse. "You're not serious," Elliot said, standing next to me in the sterile, gray hallway. "Savannah, she tried to burn down the evidence of your father's murder to protect him. She tried to frame you. She's not your sister. She's a co-conspirator." "She's both, Elliot," I said. I walked to the window and signed the bond. I paid the 10%, $25,000, from my personal account. She walked out an hour later, wearing an oversized, paper-like orange jumpsuit, her face scrubbed of makeup, her hair a limp, tangled mess. When she saw me, she didn't look relieved. She looked broken. She flinched, as if expecting me to hit her. "Why?" she whispered, her voice raw from crying. "I am not him," I said. "You're not coming home with me. You're going to a residence I've arranged. You will meet with your lawyer. You will tell him the entire truth. You will plead guilty to everything you did, and you will not, ever, lie again." She just nodded, the tears streaming, and for the first time, I think she understood. Her plea hearing was quiet, no media. I had asked the U.S. Attorney's Office for leniency in exchange for her full, unredacted testimony against our father. When it came time for sentencing, the judge asked if I, as a victim of her conspiracy, wished to speak. I did. I stood up. I didn't look at Lydia. I looked at the judge. "Your Honor," I said, "there is no doubt about the crimes committed. They were malicious, they were selfish, and they were part of a pattern of profound moral failure. But that pattern was not designed by my sister. It was taught to her. She was a tool, in the hands of a man who broke everything he touched. She believed his approval was the only thing that mattered, and he made her burn her own life down to get it. She deserves to be punished, but she also deserves the chance to one day be someone other than his daughter." The judge was silent for a long time. He accepted the plea deal, 6 months in a low-security federal facility, 5 years of probation. A lifetime ban on ever serving as an officer or director of a publicly traded company. It was a harsh sentence, but it was not the decade she could have received. As they led her out, she looked back at me, her face a mask of stunned, uncomprehending gratitude, with the family traitors either jailed or awaiting trial. I turned to the only family I had left, the company. I held the all-hands town hall 48 hours after the boardroom coup. I stood on a temporary stage on the foundry floor, the heat of the furnaces behind me, the smell of ozone and hot steel in the air. Hundreds of workers stood before me, their faces stained, tired, and deeply skeptical. "You don't know me," I began, my voice echoing in the cavernous space. "You know my name, but you don't know me. You know me as the COO, and now as the CEO, but today, I'm here as the person who is going to make this right. First, this company is no longer a private kingdom. As of this morning, I have commissioned a full, independent, forensic audit of the last 15 years. Every book, every account, every consulting fee. The results will be made public to every single one of you. We are bringing the financial truth into the light." A low murmur. Second, the workforce reduction signed by Lydia Pierce is null and void. But that's not enough. The 340 positions she cut, plus the 61 other early retirements and resignations from the last 2 months, are all being reinstated, effective immediately. A gasp. And, I continued, every single reinstated employee will receive full back pay for every day their job was stolen from them. The silence broke. It was a roar. It wasn't just cheering. It was a physical explosion of released tension, of weeks of terror and anger. Men and women wept. They hugged each other. "But we're not just going back," I shouted over the noise. "We're going forward. Northbridge Forge is merging with Iron Veil Systems." I pointed to Elliot, who stood at the back. "This means the predatory, parasitic contracts, like the one from Forge Line, are gone. We are one company. We are Northvale Industries. Our supply chain is our own. Our future is our own." "And that future," I said, "is your future. I am personally committing 15% of my own shares, my 38% controlling stake, into a new employee stock ownership plan. This is not my company anymore. It is our company." And then, the last piece. I'm also announcing the formation of the Hearthstone Foundation, endowed by the $5 million that was stolen and recovered from the Forge Line contract. Its mission will be to provide retraining, support, and new business capital for any long-term worker in this industry displaced by change. We will not leave our own behind, ever again. That night, Elliot and I sat in my new, sterile office. The ring, my great-grandfather's ring, sat on the desk between us. "That was a hell of a speech," he said, pouring 2 glasses of whiskey. "You've built a legend. Savannah Pierce, the people's CEO." He pushed a glass toward me. "So, I have to ask, was this it? Was this the plan all along? Was this revenge?" I looked at the ring. I thought about my father in his cell, Lydia in her holding facility, my mother, alone in her perfect, empty house. I found another one of his letters, Elliot, tucked into his old desk ledger. I had the words memorized. I asked him, "Is this about revenge?" I said. And Arthur wrote, "Revenge is just settling a score. Forgiveness is the final proof of power. No, this isn't revenge. This is an overthrow. We're not settling the score. We're burning the scorecard." Elliot smiled, a rare, genuine smile. "So what's next for the revolutionary?" "A new revolution," I said. "I'm announcing it tomorrow. I am giving myself 24 months, 2 years. I'll stay on as CEO to stabilize the ship, to oversee the transition to Northvale Industries, and to work with the U.S. Attorney's Office. Then, I'm stepping down." Elliot's glass stopped halfway to his lips. "You're... what? You just won." "I did, which is why I have to leave. The problem with this company wasn't just Graham. It was the name. It was Pierce. It was a dynasty. I'm going to move to chairwoman of the board, and we, I said, pointing to him, are going to spend the next 2 years on the most transparent, global, professional CEO search this industry has ever seen. We're going to hire the best person, not the best relative. Win with humanity, or don't win at all, Elliot quoted, his eyes shining. He'd be proud of you, Savannah. I didn't answer. I just drank the whiskey. The next few weeks were a blur of lawyers and therapists. My mother filed for divorce the day after Graham's arrest. She was a witness for the prosecution. She had started therapy, deep, intensive trauma therapy. We started talking, not about the past, not yet. We just walked. We walked around Lake Haven, the two of us, in the cold, crisp air. We talked about the color of the trees. We talked about the food we were going to eat. We didn't talk about the murder, or the trial, or the silence. We just were. It was a start. On my first Friday as CEO, my inbox, which had been a torrent of legal threats and panicked client calls, suddenly had a new kind of message. It was from a foundry worker. Subject: thank you. Madam CEO, I've worked here for 32 years. I was on the list. I thought my life was over. My wife and I, we just wanted to say thank you. We have our health insurance back. God bless you. Then another, from an engineer in R&D. I'm one of the ones who gave you my number. I never thought I'd hear from you. I'm back at my desk. Let's get to work. Another, and another. They flooded in. Emails from logistics, from the supervisors, from the receptionists. I sat in my office, the sun setting over the foundry, and I read them, one by one, and I wept. Not for the pain, or the fight, or the victory, but for the sheer, simple, profound relief. It was the first victory I'd ever won that didn't feel like I was just stopping a loss. It was a win. I finally understood. My goal, all this time, hadn't been to prove my father and my sister wrong. It wasn't even to save my great-grandfather's legacy. It was to do right by the people who had no power, the people who, like me, had been betrayed by the names on the door. The goal was to give a voice to the people who had never been heard, and I had. Graham's trial lasted 6 weeks. It was a brutal, meticulous dissection of a man's life, stripping away the polish of the country club to reveal the rot beneath. The prosecution used everything. The amber bottle from my mother's storage unit, the 15-year-old audio recording from Lydia's USB drive, the testimony of my mother, trembling but resolute, and the cold, hard numbers from the forensic accountants. The jury found him guilty on all counts: wire fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, and but for the death of Arthur Pierce. The charge was intentional manslaughter. The arsenic, the planning, the cold-blooded execution, it was all laid bare. The judge, citing the staggering breach of trust, both familial and financial, sentenced him to 22 years in a federal penitentiary. His assets, the lavish estate, the cars, the offshore accounts that fueled his arrogance, were seized and liquidated to pay back the company and the IRS. The old power was broken, its name erased from the ledgers. Lydia served her 6 months. She walked out of the low-security facility on a cold, gray morning. I was there. She didn't say a word, just got in my car. She didn't come back to the company. She couldn't. Instead, she started a new job. I gave her one. She became a file clerk at the Hearthstone Foundation, the very fund I had endowed with the money from her disastrous Forge Line contract. Her new office was a cubicle in a basement. Her work was not glamorous. It was data entry, processing applications from displaced workers. It was humble, and it was useful. I was in my office 6 months later when the director of the foundation sent me a video link. It was security footage, no audio. It showed Lydia sitting across from a man in his late 50s, a former foundry worker. She was walking him through a business plan for a small forklift and logistics company. He was signing a paper, his first seed capital contract. Lydia was crying, but she was also smiling. She reached across the desk and shook his hand. It was the first honest transaction of her entire life. Northvale Industries, The company we had forged from the ruins didn't just survive, it soared. Our first quarter report was a bombshell. Revenue was up 32%. Client retention was at 96%. And the internal employee satisfaction survey, the first one we had ever conducted, came back with the highest approval rating in the industry. In my office, the CEO's office, I didn't hang my awards. I hung the framed, handwritten letter from my great-grandfather. It was the only thing I needed to see. Win with humanity, or don't win at all. A year after that first, terrible dinner, we had Thanksgiving again, not at the estate, which was being sold at a federal auction. We had it at my new, smaller house near the lake. It was just the four of us. Me, my mother, who was slowly, quietly finding her own voice, Elliot, and Lydia. I set a place at the head of the table, where I sat, and next to me, I set a place for Arthur, an empty chair, an empty plate, and a single glass of the best whiskey we owned, a toast to the man who built the foundation and set the lock. We ate, we talked. The silence was not heavy this time. It was just peaceful. Then, Lydia stood. Her hand was shaking, just a little. She raised her glass of water. I'm not good at this, she began, her voice thick. I don't have a speech. I want to say something. She looked at me, her eyes clear, the old arrogant fire gone, replaced by something new, something fragile and strong. You had every right to destroy me. Savannah, you could have let me go to prison for 10 years. You could have erased me, but you didn't. You chose to save me. She took a ragged breath. You saved me. Thank you. The table was silent. My mother was crying, but this time, her tears were quiet, cleansing. Elliot put his hand on mine. Then he stood. Well, he said, his voice uncharacteristically rough. I guess this is a night for big moves. He reached into his pocket. He didn't pull out a velvet box. He pulled out a simple, silver ring, not a high-tech surveillance device, not a family heirloom, just a ring. Savannah Pierce, he said, you are the most terrifying, competent, and decent person I have ever known. I have been your strategist, your co-conspirator, and your partner. I would very much like to just be your husband. He didn't kneel. He just looked at me, his eyes full of a promise of a normal, quiet life after the storm. I said yes. Later that night, as we finished the pie, I told them my other news. I've officially given my 24-month notice to the board, I said. The executive search for the new, external CEO of Northvale Industries begins on Monday. Lydia looked confused. But you won. It's your company. No, I said, looking at the empty chair. It's not. It never was. The problem was that a Pierce was always meant to be in charge. The name was the disease. Power shouldn't be a legacy. Lydia, it should be a rental, a coat you wear for a while, and then you pass it on, making sure it's in better condition than when you received it. I looked around the table, at my new family, my broken, healing, remade family. It brings up a good question. For all of us, I said. When you're finally given the victory, when you finally get the power you always wanted, what do you do with it? Do we use a victory to heal, or just to repeat the old mistakes? The fire crackled. Outside, the first snow of the season began to fall. I stood by the back window, long after everyone had gone to bed. I looked out at the quiet, dark lake. I felt the weight of the new, simple ring on my finger. I touched my left wrist, my thumb finding the small, familiar shape of the teardrop mark. My great-grandfather's key, my inheritance. I smiled. The war was over, and I had finally, truly chosen. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'm curious, where in the world are you listening from? Let me know in the comments so we can connect. And please share your own thoughts on this. Be sure to subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and give it a little extra love by hitting that hype button so more people can hear it.